press conference in which I am going to cancel some regular season games. We worked hard to avoid an outcome that's bad for our fans, bad for our players, and bad for our clubs. I want to assure our fans that our failure to reach an agreement was not due to a lack of effort by either party. The players came here for 9 days. They worked hard. They tried to make a deal, and I appreciate their effort. Our committee of club representatives committed to the process. They offered compromise after compromise and hung in past the deadline to make sure that we exhausted every possibility of reaching an agreement before the cancellation of games. So far, the parties have failed to achieve their mutual goal of reaching an agreement. The unfortunate thing, maybe the most unfortunate thing, is that agreement, the one we've offered to our players, offered huge benefits for our fans and for our players. We have listened to the Players Association throughout the process. A primary goal of the Players Association has been to increase pay for younger players. I said in Orlando, and I'll say it again, we agree and share that goal. We offered to raise the minimum salary to $700,000, an increase of $130,000 from last year. We offered to create an annual bonus pool of $30 million for our very best young players. In total, we're offering nearly a 33% raise to almost 2/3 of Major League players, and we're adding more than $100 million annually in additional compensation for this younger player group. The proposal also addressed player and fan concerns about issues like service time and competition. Baseball would for the first time have a draft lottery, the most aggressive lottery in professional sports. Also, for the first time ever, we agreed to an incentive system to encourage clubs to promote top prospects on opening day. We also proposed that the first and second place finishers in Rookie of the Year voting in each league would receive a full year of service no matter how long they were in the major leagues. The MLB PA asked us to make free agency more robust. For the first time ever, we agreed to eliminate draft pick compensation, a change that the MLB PA has sought for decades. On the competitive balance tax, we offered a significantly larger first-year increase than in the last two agreements, bearing in mind that the competitive balance tax is the only mechanism in our agreement that protects some semblance of a level playing field among the clubs. The international draft would have more fairly allocated talent among the clubs and reduced abuses in some international markets. We also listened to our fans. The expanded playoffs would bring the excitement of meaningful September baseball and postseason baseball to fans in more markets. While we preferred the 14-team format, when the format became a significant obstacle, we listened to the players' concerns and offered a compromise by accepting the 12-team format. Finally, we offered a procedural agreement that would allow for the timely implementation of sorely needed rules like the pitch timer and the elimination of shifts to improve the entertainment value of the game on the field. And we agreed to the universal DH. So what's next? The calendar dictates that we're not going to be able to play the first two series of the regular season, and those games are officially canceled. We're prepared to continue negotiations. We've been informed that the MLB PA is headed back to New York, meaning that no agreement is possible until at least Thursday. As such, camps could not meaningfully operate until at least March 8th, leaving only 23 days before the scheduled opening day. The clubs and our owners fully understand just how important it is to our millions of fans that we get the game on the field as soon as possible. To that end, we want a bargain and we want an agreement with the Players Association as quickly as possible. You gonna do them or am I? Okay, Hannah.
I got two, so make the first one.
Well, you only get one.
I'm gonna try it for a second. Okay, so this has been out there a little bit, this phrase, and I just wanted to be super clear. Was this your last, best, and final offer in a legal sense, or are you willing to say you're at impasse?
We never used the phrase last, best, and final offer with the union. We said to them that it was our best offer prior to the deadline to cancel games. Our negotiations are deadlocked right now, but I'm not going to get in. You know, that's different than using the legal term impasse, and I'm not going to do that.
If it's not your last, best, and final offer, why would they have accepted it? If they knew they could get something better later?
Yeah, look, I think that take it or leave it in a negotiation is not something that I think is usually productive. I think always at the end, there's a little wiggle room somewhere, and I think that we like to keep the idea that we're willing to go back to the table and figure out whether we can make an agreement.
What do you say to the fans who say they're fed up with both sides of this and the possible loss of revenue from them not buying tickets?
Ron, the only thing I can say is that from the perspective of the Commissioner's office and the clubs, we are doing our very, very best to try to reach an agreement. Unfortunately, it's not something that's solely within our control. It takes two parties to reach an agreement, and we will continue to be committed to that process.
What timeline? Is there another session scheduled, or who goes first? The owners to the players, vice versa?
All I can say, nothing's scheduled right now. And we made a proposal this afternoon. I believe, without exception, every topic, we have made the last proposal. Every single issue in the basic agreement, we have made the last proposal. You draw your own conclusion as to who ought to go next.
When you guys are, weighing these offers with the owners and talking things through, how much, if at all, do you weigh the financial impact on people who aren't in the room, the workers at the stadiums who get affected, and obviously the fans?
Yeah, look, I think that the concern about our fans is at the very top of our consideration list, followed closely by places like where we're standing, where people's livelihood depends on baseball, spring training baseball, and certainly an important part of the calculus for us and for our owners. Hey, James.
Hey, Rob. Could you explain the league's position on why you say cancellation of games and why not say reschedule or at least make the hope to still fit the full season in?
Yeah, we have a first-time situation in terms of the loss of regular season games. We've never, since we've gone to interleague play every day, we've never canceled games. So if you think about the way that the schedule works, every single day you have an interleague series where those teams are not back together enough to make rescheduling feasible.
So do you think the pay, full pay and service time will now be something you have to negotiate with the union and players?
Yeah, I think that our position is that games that are not played, players will not get paid for. John.
Rob, obviously there were some good things in the deal for the players, including over a 20% rise for the minimum players, the minimum paid players. However, the CBT, how do you explain? It was 210 million, right? So you're raising it to 220 million. That's less than a 5% rise, and then it's repeated the next subsequent years at $220 million. So it's basically only a 5% rise over 3 years. They would tell you that inflation is up 7% now. Their salaries have stagnated, and obviously they wouldn't like that part of the deal.
Look,
how do you explain that?
Well, I think that it's important to look at the pattern of increases in the CBT thresholds over the last several agreements, and I think the proposal that we made is right in line with the type of increases we've seen in the past. I think you also need to remember that the last 5 years been very difficult years from a revenue perspective for the industry given the pandemic. So, you know, this is, and last, look, we have a payroll disparity problem. And to weaken the only mechanism in the agreement that's designed to promote some semblance of competitive balance is just something that I don't think the club group is prepared to do right now. Look, I didn't take, I know where the clubs are. I know they are 100% behind the proposal that was made and the decision to cancel games given where we are in the negotiation. Hey, Bob.
Some progress made. We kind of made a deadline these last couple of days. Is there any thoughts about having another deadline in the future?
Look, we're in the process of, we went through a really long 9 or 10 days. We had a really late night last night and not a particularly productive day today. We need to regroup and figure out how we're going to move the process forward. That's the best I can do for you.
Hey, Rob, understanding that deadlines create urgency, you locked out the players to jumpstart the negotiations. It feels like real bargaining went on just in the last 24 to 36 hours. I'm sure people are wondering why not over the last three months or even longer to get to a point where you're not necessarily canceling games because there's some momentum here.
Yeah, I think the best answer to that question is the last 10 days. We've been here ready to bargain, full committees, owners, players for 10 days, and it got going 2 days before the deadline. You know, that's the best explanation I can give you.
Rob, is the sport in a more perilous position now than it was in '94, '95 because of the number of entertainment options that are out there, how easy it is for people to turn to a Netflix or anything on their cell phone?
Yeah, look, the entertainment market today is different than 1994. My deepest hope is that we get an agreement quickly, we're back on the field, and, you know, we get back into that market and compete effectively.
Rob, you've said many times you see yourself as a deal maker. You take pride in the previous agreements you've made. So how much do you see this outcome as reflecting on you as commissioner now?
Look, the difficult thing about this, if it was solely within my ability or the ability of the clubs to get an agreement, we'd have an agreement. The tough thing about this process is it takes both parties to make an agreement. I'm really disappointed that we didn't make an agreement, and I'm really committed to doing everything possible to get one.
Ken's last day on the job.
Thank you.
The last question of the press conference.
You've been so kind, it's sorry to see you go.
Thank you.
Really gonna miss you.
Feeling is mutual. You could argue that this is not a surprise when you look at the developments of the past 5 years. You know, really since shortly after that 2016 CBA, there's been a lot of chatter on their side. I'm wondering if you regret having done, understanding it takes both sides, regret not having done more on your side to try to avoid this disastrous outcome.
Yeah, look, what I would say, Ken, is, you know, we did take a stab at some early negotiations. Throughout the 5-year period, there was a lot of rhetoric about dissatisfaction with the deal that they made. A lot of the rhetoric was negative with respect to clubs, the commissioner's office, me. You know, that environment someone else created. And it's an environment in which it's tough to build bridges.
As a former player, as a fan, for our game, today is a sad day. We came to Florida to navigate or to negotiate for a fair collective bargaining agreement. Despite meeting daily while here in Florida, there is still work that needs to be done. We are seeking improvements to our CBA because significant improvements are needed. We've made no mistake about that fact over the course of the last 3 or 4 years based on what we've seen on the field and off the field. It's against that backdrop of growing revenues and record profits for owners in the league that players seek and deserve nothing more than fundamental fairness. Players want to play. We all know that. But the reason we're not playing is simple. A lockout is the ultimate economic weapon. Let me repeat that. A lockout is the ultimate economic weapon. In a $10 billion industry, the owners have made a conscious decision to use this weapon against the greatest asset they have, the players. But the group won't be intimidated. I've seen more unity over the last few years than at any time in our recent history. Our guys care deeply about the game, care deeply about the fans, and care deeply about our player fraternity. And they are focused on improving the rights and benefits for today's generation of player and for the generations to come. Needless to say, we remain committed to the bargaining process and getting back on the field as soon as possible.
Answer it. I mean, you guys knew coming in this was going to be contentious and they were going to kind of roll over for you, but was there anything about the way the owners approached this or their priorities that surprised you and complicated this even more than you thought?
Thank you for the question, and I suppose I should have introduced the folks that are here on the dais. To my right, Andrew Miller. To my left, Bruce Meyer with the PA, and Max Scherzer on his left. In regard to the process and what we've seen, the entire process has been an interesting one, to say the least. In a world where you are looking to make changes, make adjustments, make improvements based on what it is you're seeing, you understand that you need as much time as possible to work through those things. It's why we started the process when we did in April. It's why we made the core economic proposals that we did in the first part of May. It's why we remained available, whether on Zoom or as the pandemic afforded us the opportunity to meet in person. We made ourselves available then. It's why we sequestered ourselves in a hotel in Dallas with the hope of working toward an agreement. It's why we stood ready for 6 weeks after the lockout on December 1st, ready to have a discussion. It is remarkably interesting against the backdrop of the things that needed to be worked through to find ourselves on February 28th, over the course of the last week in West Palm Beach, working through the issues that, quite honestly, needed to be and could have been and should have been discussed in more depth much earlier.
If you don't want to get benched this season, don't strike out. Hit that like button, swing at the subscribe button, and hit a home run on that notification bell. Thank you for watching the Improbable podcast. Have an improbably awesome rest of your day.